It's past time to expose the Democrats and Republicans for usurping liberty and freedom. What you are about to hear is the amalgam of passion and truth. This is the Southern Liberty Radio Show. Good evening, everyone, to this episode of Good on Southern Liberty. I am your host, Mr. Roderick Threats. It is July 17th, 2026. And I can say beyond a shadow of a doubt, I very seldom change my position when it comes to liberty. I very seldom submit to the way that would be something to step on someone else's liberty. But I'll be the first one I'll even be the last one if I have to stand above, stand mighty against any and everyone that wants to impede on the liberty of others. Because one thing we don't do in America is support authoritarian or totalitarian ways. Because the last thing we should even be doing is reverting back to what the king did to us. And I really want everybody to really sit back and think about this. Really think about this. Because we are at a point in our country where shit's going downhill fast, and there's not a firearm that fires fast enough to stop it. By no means am I advocating for violence or any of that. But what I am saying is if we don't get control of our republic, those individual liberties we enjoy will be up in smoke or written away with the stroke of a pen or maybe an auto pen. I don't know. One of the ways we can stop that, though, y'all, because I'm going to give you solutions. I'm going to give you a solution. Is to stop the majoritarian trap. I decided to do this because I came across an article when I woke up from my inconvenient nap. And I was like, oh, maybe we need to talk about state constitutions, because You hear me say it all the time, right? Your liberty will be taken first on the local and state level before the federal could even get to you. How are they doing that? They're using 51% majority rule to amend constitutions. I mean, just like Ohio, right? Ohio has the right to abortion in their constitution. And you guys, you heard me talk about it. I vehemently reject that. Not because I'm not against the rights of the person, right? It's not that. Social issues should not be in your constitution. Your constitution is written to set the framework for your government, not to administer or dispense social justice, right? But here we are adding social issues into our governmental frameworks. But this evening, we're going to blow the whistle on this whole psychological operation currently dominating all the legacy media, right? Because right now, if you have a secondary device, you can turn it on and go to the CNNs of the world, right? And the CBS and the ABCs, and they're broadcasting, literally broadcasting in some shape or form or wording, right? Over a supposedly unprecedented attack on voting rights, right? And they're literally pointing their fingers at states like North Dakota, South Dakota, Missouri, Utah, right? And they want to cry boo hoo hoo, cry foul because these states are raising the voter threshold to pass state constitutional amendments from a simple majority to a 60% supermajority, right? Now you have the progressive talking heads, aka, sorry, I said it wrong, the progressive slash communist slash socialist talking heads, right? They're calling it a threat to democracy itself. Newsflash, bozos. This is an attack on freedom. It's a defensive firewall, as I like to call it, right? Because we know the political left is desperate for pure, unchecked majoritarian rule, right? Because they know that a temporary 51% mob, right? Watch this a second, right? That we all know are funded by out-of-state collectivist billionaires like the Bezoses of the world and the Klaus Schwabs of the world, right? But this 51% mob makes it easier to systematically rewrite our state constitutions and stripe away the sovereignty of the living man, right? I'm going to walk you through my way of deconstructing this majoritarian trap, right? And I'm going to bring up the 2026 ballot measures and help you understand the mechanics of how direct democracy is weaponized by the administrative state, right? And also prove why our founders built a constitutional republic, not a pure majoritarian democracy. So get your notepads out because this is how it's going to go down. Get your notepads out. We're going to do what it do. Make sure you guys like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Share it with your peoples on your social medias and all that. Because again, these are messages people need to hear. These are messages that people rarely hear for the most part, and we can tell by the way people they talk to us how much they really understand, but they want to pontificate on it, right? We know those people, don't we? We know all those people. So let's talk about the psychological foundation on this here. Okay. And ask yourself, within the last 30 years, why is there a sudden obsession from these communists and these progressive groups, same one and the same, right, with what they call direct democracy, right? I mean, we see the initiative, right, with the National Interstate Compact bit. That's a direct democracy measure, right? Right. But it's a psychological play, right? Because we know the left. I mean, not saying the right, the political right per se doesn't do it, but it's more pronounced in the left, and we can see it for most of us, right? It's an intentional psychological play, right? Like if you can convince. Now, actually, let me take that back. They have convinced a population that democracy means whatever 51% of the people want at any given second. And at that point, you literally completely hollow out the concept of inherent inalienable rights. The left uses direct democracy as a tool of emotional manipulation. Okay. And what they do, we see them do it all the time, right? What they do is pick an emotionally charged issue, whether it's a radical economic restructuring or property zoning laws or environmental mandates, and they use massive corporate ad campaigns to manufacture a temporary spike in public anxiety, right? This is what we see on the streets, right? I know y'all have seen the videos of the protesters sitting in the middle of the roadway protesting big oil, right? We've seen this is what this is, right? They these companies and these whatever you want to, these communist collectivist whatever, right? They manufacture this public anxiety where these people in the streets not knowing why they're there, why they're there, and they're getting hurt, they're getting killed, they're getting shot at, they're getting beat because they're sitting in the middle of the roadway and people got shit to do, right? But they manufacture this crisis, and then they turn around and tell you that the people vote on it directly via a ballot measure, right? But the rope-a-dope, right? Watch the rope-a-dope, right? Because in these certain states that they do this in, they only need 50% plus one vote, right? So that means if a temporary majority gets swept up in a media-driven frenzy on a Tuesday, they can permanently alter the supreme law of a state by Wednesday, right? This ain't freedom. This is majoritarian tyranny. It bypasses the complete entire legislative process. It skips committee hearings. It skips rigorous debate. And most importantly, it completely silences the political minority, right? The psychological goal of the collectivist is to make the individual feel small, to make you believe that if the collective votes to seize your land or regulate your business out of existence, you have to just bow your head and accept it because the majority has spoken. And we see this, right? We see this all the time, even down to the political violence, right? We see it down to the political violence. I mean, if someone wears a red hat and they don't read, they don't read the red hat. It could say, it could be a baseball team, but because it's a red hat, the emotionally charged left will fight you, punch you, even kill you over wearing a red hat. Like they're fighting like Crips and Bloods. You come to find out the red hat was a Chicago Cubs hat. This actually happened. Actually, the guy didn't die, but they beat him up because he had a red hat on, and it was the Chicago Cubs. This is the public anxiety I'm talking about. These are the people that would vote on a ballot measure to make sure you could never wear that red hat, or make sure you could never can never be a conservative or libertarian in public. But let's keep it clear and keep it G a second, right? The conservatives, for the most part, want to do the same thing. They want to completely outlaw leftist ideology by using the government to do it. Same thing, right? It's not like the other side of the paradigm, the right side of the paradigm, can manufacture a frenzy, right? A media anxiety frenzy, and then do the same thing what I just described. Temporary 51% majority, wipe you out of existence. Period. This is dangerous because the people that are in this public anxiety frenzy are they're miseducated. Misinformed is not the good word here. They're miseducated. So they'll go off anything off feelings. This is why they holler the people on the left, they'll see you again, going back to the red hat, and scream shame, shame, shame. They try to make you feel small because you have a political opinion they don't like. This is dangerous. Again, these are the people that will use a ballot measure to wipe you out of existence and make you hold your head down in shame forever in fear of being hurt or killed. So I want to go, if I remember correctly, right? Because I want to literally wipe out this understanding from the left and their public anxiety frenzy, and all the stuff that they're doing concerning direct democracy, right? If we go back, I think it's Federalist number 10 or 11. I think it's 10 because it was James Madison that wrote it. But James Madison, right, forewarned us that pure democracies, right, and he talked about that these spectacles of turbulence. Yeah, that's what it was. The spectacles of turbulence and contention have ever been found compatible with personal security or the rights of property. I want you to think about that a second, right? And James Madison was right. These spectacles of turbulence and contention, right, have been found incompatible with personal security or the rights of property. Because these people, that turbulence, right, that James Madison is talking about in Federalist number 10, the turbulence of the protest blocking the roadways so you can't move around, right? They don't care about public property. They'll even infringe on your private property, aka jump on your vehicle, bash on your windows. This is what James Madison is talking about here, right? I mean, back then obviously we didn't have all that, but we put it property in its context today. This is what he's talking about. And I think he also talks about in Federalist number 10, right? Where he also says, God, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head without having to punch in on a computer or a tablet. Um, he also talks about how in general it's been short lived, right? Because these same people are violent in their deaths. I think that's it. Those you got another device, look up Federalist number 10. I might be right, but I think I'm right. But with that being said, let's think about this a minute, right? Let's think about this a minute. Actually, I'm gonna pull my tablet out real quick and I'm gonna look here real quick. So I need to make sure I'm right before I say this next thing so it makes sense, right? Let's see, Federalist number 10. See, Madison. There it is right there. So it says, have ever been spectacles of turbulence and contention, have ever been found incompatible with personal security or the rights of property. I was right. And have in general been as short in their lives as they have been violent in their deaths. Now, let's put that in today's context, what James Madison was talking about. Think about what these anti-ICE protesters are doing, right? These people don't care about personal security. They don't care about rights of property, right? And that compelling statement have in general been as short in their lives as they have been violent in their deaths. See, this public anxiety disorder, I guess I can call it a disorder, right? Speaks to exactly what Madison just said in that last statement. I mean, look, let's go there a second, right? Renee Good, right? Her public anxiety to protect illegal immigrants and block ICE from their duties, she became so emotionally charged and filled with anxiety that she turned the wheel of that vehicle and drove towards that ICE agent, which popped her in her forehead. What did Madison say? Have in general been as short in their lives as they have been violent in their deaths. How old was Renee Good? She went around long, 30s. Hmm? Look at Alex Preddy. Same thing, isn't it? Same exact thing. He had messed with ICE agents before impeding their progress. Then he goes to the protest the next day with a firearm and it falls out. I don't care which way you side on that Alex Preddy thing. But having that gun at that protest got him killed. I'll repeat again what Madison said. And have in general been as short in their lives as they have been violent in their deaths. The framers knew, right? Let me go back before I even talk about the framers a second, right? This is these people, these groups like, that Renee Good was a part of, and Alex Preddy, and these people are a part of this anti-ICE authoritarian citizen movement, right? Is all created by public anxiety. And the only way you can infuse public anxiety upon the citizens and the living men and women of the land is to stoke fear into something they do not know or they're ignorant about. This is the 51%. These are the tyrants. See, the founders knew, The framers of the Constitution knew that a raw majority is just as capable of operating as a tyrant as a king with the crown. That is why they did not build a pure democracy. They created a constitutional republic backed by an institutional gridlock, the separation of powers, and the electoral college. They purposely built a system where a temporary, passionate majority has to slow down, cool off, and face institutional checks before they can touch the foundational text of the law. So I want people to understand our constitutions, federal and state and territorial constitutions, is not a flexible whiteboard for the flavor of the month progressive or communist or socialist agenda. It is an ironclad limit placed upon government power to protect the individual from the mob. I want people to understand that. Now, let's look at the hard data of everything a second, right? There is a few political battlegrounds playing out right now. And across this country, pure and true constitutionalists are fighting back by raising the defensive threshold, right? Let's look at the measures that are on the table right now in these state legislatures. For example, in North Dakota, right? Lawmakers have passed House Concurrent Resolution 3003, which aims to establish a strict 60% threshold for citizen-led constitutional amendments on the November ballot. In South Dakota, they're doing the exact same thing with what's called Amendment L, which is pushing the same identical 60% supermajority. But let the legacy medias, let the CNNs and the MSNBCs, MS Nows, whatever you want to call them now, right? They look at these states and claim that conservative lawmakers are trying to lock people out, is how they're trying to frame it, right? But we're not going to go with the narrative. Let's just spit this out in common sense. Let's spit it out in common sense, right? Requiring a 60% supermajority really doesn't lock anybody out, right? What it actually does is it forces a movement, right, to build a broad, enduring consensus before they can touch the foundational contract of the state. Not just 50 plus one. You need to have overwhelming 60% of people believing in this before you can change the foundational contract of the state, aka the Constitution of that state. Right? Is if we go back, if we look, if we look at the United States Constitution, right, and when the framers inked it out in 1787, they didn't say it could be altered by a super majority, a simple majority vote, right, in Congress, or a quick national referendum. They put it in Article 5, didn't they? Article 5 set an incredibly high bar, right? A 2/3 vote in both houses of Congress or a convention of states, followed by the ratification from 3/4 of the states. Why? Because they understood the legal mechanics of a contract. To change a contract in the private sector, and I'm going to use this example. To change a contract in the public sector, you need the consent of the parties involved because a contract protects the minority from being exploited by the majority. A state constitution is the highest political contract between the government and the living individuals on the land. Let me repeat this again so people catch this, right? Your state constitution is the highest political contract between the government and the living individuals on the land within that jurisdiction. Didn't say federal. I didn't say federal. I said state. The federal constitution was never supposed to touch the living man within the land, was not supposed to. Your state constitutions is what's supposed to dictate to the living man between the government and the living man, not the federal constitution. Secondly, why on earth should a razor thin 50 plus one majority, right? Now, I want to go back to this a second. Just hit my forehead, right? Why on earth would a razor thin 50 plus one majority, which have been heavily manipulated by out of state special interest money, be allowed to unilaterally rewrite that contract for the other 49%? They shouldn't. And that's exactly why these 2026 supermajority firewalls are so critical, because they protect rural communities, they protect individual small businesses, and the individual citizen from being entirely steamrolled by a temporary centralized ideological surge. And if an individual does not understand that, they have lost their way. They need to read the Constitution and be re-educated on what individual liberty means. Not only individual liberty for the living man and woman on the land, but for the state too. Right? Let's shift gears a little bit. Right? No, I was looking at this as I was before I came onto the show. If you want a brilliant case study in how to neutralize the collectivist urban playbook, you know what I'm talking about when I talk about collectivist urban playbook, right? You look directly at what's happening in Missouri with their landmark proposed constitutional updates. I would say, in my opinion, Missouri hit a massive structural point because they realized that progressive groups, communist and socialist groups like DSA, or radical environmental coalitions can achieve a simple 51% statewide majority just by heavily turning out voters in two concentrated urban hubs, which would be St. Louis and Kansas City, right? While completely ignoring the remaining 112 counties in the state. It's the exact same strategy they tried to use at the federal level by attempting to abolish the Electoral College and the U.S. Senate. They want a handful of high density zip codes to dictate terms to entire geography, right? But the Missouri model, right, introduces a vital counterweight. Wait till I tell you about this, right? In the Missouri model, right, they're requiring a constitutional amendment to pass not just with statewide majority, but with a majority within each individual congressional district. This is brilliant. This is literally constitutional brilliance, right? And let's think about this a minute, right? Let me bring some history into this, right? This perfectly tracks with the Connecticut Compromise of 1787, or known as the Sherman Compromise of 1787, right? Because remember, during the Constitutional Convention, the larger states wanted representation based purely on population so they could dominate the system. The small states stood firm and said, no, that is tyranny, right? The result was the creation of the United States Senate, where every state had an equal voice regardless of population, right? And it also is balancing the raw numbers with geographic sovereignty. The Missouri model applies this exact principle to the state level. It's freaking brilliant. I mean, we've talked about on the show before, right, about having the electoral college on the state level, right? We've talked about that. And I think right now it should become a thing or a movement pushed towards that, right? It can be done, but that's a conversation for another day. I need to explore and lay that plan, how that would actually work and the mechanisms of that, right? But this Missouri model applies exactly what the Sherman Compromise of 1787 was, right? It completely changes the psychological dynamic of a political campaign. It forces an organization to actually step outside of their urban comfort zones, talk to the living people on the land in rural and suburban communities, and find common ground while doing it. If your policy is so radical that it only appeals to a highly concentrated group of academic elites in a city center, it has absolutely no business becoming permanent supreme law of the state. This is how we firewall our state borders from creeping urban socialism. By requiring a geographic consensus, we would actually ensure that a state constitution remains a true reflection of the whole people rather than a weaponized tool used by urban collectives to enshrine dependency and choke out independent commerce. I'm going to write more on this Missouri model. I'm going to write more on this. I'm going to throw it on a Patreon sometime, probably sometime this weekend when I get a moment, because this is, I mean, every state should actually go to something like this instead of the 60%. It should, I mean, it depends, right? States like New York would benefit from the Missouri model. States like Florida would benefit from the Missouri model, right? Your states that have high density population areas, they should apply the Missouri model. But we'll go there. So I'll mark that up this weekend for sure. Now, in the meantime, before we implement the Missouri model, let's go to the counteroffensive to these people a second. The question is, where do we draw the line? How do we articulate this defense to a public that has been thoroughly brainwashed by the mainstream democracy narrative? There's only really one true way to do it. We do it by boldly reclaiming the terminology. We must unashamedly Remind this nation that we are not a democracy. We are a constitutional republic. You have heard me say this before. I'm going to repeat it again. The word democracy does not appear once in the United States Constitution or the Declaration of Independence. Article 5, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution explicitly guarantees every state in this union a what? Republican form of government. That means government strictly limited by law, anchored by the separation of powers and designed to protect inherent pre-political rights that no majority can ever vote away. So within that, we deploy the 10th Amendment. Our state legislatures, can't speak, have the sovereign authority to structure their amendment process to prevent majoritarian overreach. We must aggressively back the 60% supermajority measures on these 2026 ballots if you're in those states. Also, and I'm going to throw a shameless plug in there, right? The shield of the Ninth Amendment, right? And what I'm going to do, I'm going to start doing myself here at the Ninth Amendment Project, right? We're going to push more education to the citizens that your natural sovereignty as the living man or woman on the land is immune to the ballot box, right? Even if 51% of our population votes to implement a socialist mandate or state controlled retail, they do not possess the moral or constitutional authority to violate your private property or your right to voluntary contract. That's something I'm going to work on also and get that out there for everybody. But last but not least of this, right? We reject the semantic trap. When the media calls these measures anti-democratic, our response must be clear and firm. Yes, they are intentionally designed to stop the tyranny of the mob, and we stand flat-footed in defense of the republic. Period. No other talk, no back talk. That's where we need to be. They can say whatever they want. As I always say, many people say, I said what I said. And you should say the same thing. I said what I said. Any other talking, any other back talk I'm going to call it manipulation or attempted manipulation, because you're going to try to talk me out of a position that is ironclad in stone in American common law, American jurisprudence, United States Constitution, and state constitution. Ironclad. In closing, I want to remind people human liberty belongs to the individual, not a state managed collective or a temporary voting majority. The battle lines for our state constitutions are live right now. They're live everywhere. And we got to keep our face, hands, nose, ears to the grindstone as we hear things. We step in front of it. And they're going to call you all kinds of names. They're going to call you everything because they've never really been checked before. Even today, right? Even today. And this is why I keep getting on my conservative friends and my libertarian friends. They always talk about the No Kings protests and how they're always protesting no kings and all this stuff. And do these people not have jobs? Da 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 da. These people that are doing these no king protests and all of that, they're garnering public opinion. They're influencing public opinion. The more people coming to their side. Why? Because people do not see the counter offensive. Because conservatives, oh, I got a family, I got to stay home, and this, that, and the third. No, 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 no. This is not the time to stay home anymore. Stay home no more. Get out and organize. Get on these street corners like they do. You don't have to be a counter, because the thing is when you counter protest or protest, it's not productive. It is not productive. You found your own street corner, your own venue, and you do your own peaceful assembly with your signs. Big O sign. We're not a democracy. We are a constitutional republic. We reclaim this. No more sitting at home and say, oh no, we'll just let them take care of it. Because obviously the team you're depending on to take care of it aren't taking care of it. Your voice is just as important as those people at the No Kings is important. The only way you're going to win, we're going to win this ideological civil war that we're going through right now is to be out on the street corners just like they're on the street corners. What's it take on a Saturday? 3-4 hours on a Saturday morning to go to go hold up a sign in support of your ideology? You got all weekend. You can't give 3 hours for that? The only way we're going to take and win this ideological civil war is to be present, to be loud, and to be out in front. Because at the end of the day, if you don't show up, they don't know alternative opinions exist, except for on social media. And in social media even filters that to tailor to what they want you to see. But I guarantee the best social media, right? I mean, I might have 178,000 followers on TikTok. I might have that, right? Only 2,000 or so people are seeing my content that I post, because the algorithm is directing me away from them. But you know what the best social media is? Standing on that street corner with the same sign, with the same sayings. Standing on that street corner, I will see more than 2,000 people in 1 hour going through an intersection. You hear what I'm saying? You don't need a whole mob of people. You just need 3 or 4 people to chill with you for 2 or 3 hours a day on a weekend day. And you go stand out on the busiest intersection in your town for 3 hours, and you're going to see more than 10,000 people in those 3 hours go through that intersection. 20,000, depending on where you are. That's where we should be. If we're going to change public opinion and we're going to stand on business, we need to stand on business the same way these No Kings people and these anti-ICE people. Because remember, these people are in the news and they're influencing public opinion through legacy media. When conservatives and libertarians and liberty defenders alike do the same thing and garner that same attention, the narrative may start changing, but it ain't gonna change by us sitting at home every weekend drinking beers and having barbecues. While you actually having a barbecue with your family and your friends coming over, y'all go hold a sign on a corner for a couple hours. Go get the permit and go sit on a corner for a couple hours. It ain't got to be an elaborate sign. Hold up the sign. We're not a democracy. We're a constitutional republic, right? Liberty over statism. That's all it takes. That's all it takes. With that being said, I appreciate y'all. I love y'all. Make sure you check us out, torchlibertymedia.com, ninthamendmentproject.org, and make sure you like, subscribe, share, and all that good stuff to the show. God bless y'all. I love y'all. Keep your families close and safe. And we will see you back here for Chasing Life, Liberty, and Minarchy on Monday. Peace and love, everybody.